All right, well, we will call our meeting to session. As we all know, in keeping with an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th of 2021, this meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board or commission members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count toward quorum. And the meeting's going to be broadcast, I believe, going to be broadcast live. Do we have confirmation on that, Stephanie, or is this being recorded?
I don't think this meeting is broadcast live.
Okay, excellent. So with that, we'll just indicate a quorum. I will call out names, and if you wouldn't mind just saying your name and present, that would be great. James Lee.
Here.
Greg Strange.
Strange present.
Welcome, sir. Carol Lundeen, not make it tonight. Mr. Ed Hands.
Here.
Dennis Sheedy. Dennis here? Nope.
Yes, and yeah.
Excellent, great.
Muted.
John Ventresco.
Here.
Amanda Varela.
Varela here.
Meredith Keach.
Keach here.
And Tom Broussard is here as well. So welcome, everybody. We can get started and get down to business. Tonight we have some minutes to kick off first. We do have minutes, and I would just ask folks, there have been minutes that have been previously accepted, and we have decided to not release up until now. In terms of executive minutes, they would be February 11th, March 18th, April 8th, July 8th, September 9th, October 14th. I would put forth that we would also, due to the topics that are covered in them, not pursue accepting them now. But I would, as we enter, should we enter executive session later on today, ask everybody to review them. And I will as well, and I've asked Stephanie to, just to see if any of those minutes, any of the topics we have been able to finalize. And so perhaps next meeting, we would be able to potentially accept that. So if everybody's okay with that, I will pass on those minutes and move on to November 18th regular session minutes. Is that acceptable for everybody? That seems to work.
Yes.
All right, with that said, hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes of November 18th, the regular session minutes, I'd like to point out. And if folks find that acceptable and somebody would like to make a motion to accept, and since they are regular, it would be to accept and release.
Move to accept and release.
Second.
So that's Lee and Hands. All those in favor in
There were two typographical errors. Oaks Ames is referred to as Oak Ames twice.
Great catch. So I would recommend that this vote is to accept and release pending those corrections. And that was Lee and Hands. And we'll go around the room. Mr. Strange.
Strange, yes.
Mr. Hands.
Yes.
Mr. Sheedy.
Dennis is still muted.
It doesn't show muted, but it's not. He gave us a thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah.
Excellent.
That's in Robert's rules.
Can I jump in real quick? Tom,
Yes.
so just in referencing the dates that you noted, so I have in my inbox from the 6th, executive meeting minutes from November 18th, it says, and then it says meeting minutes November 14th. Am I missing one? Or are these?
Nope, you're right. I think the dates are transposed. The correct date would be the 18th. So
Okay.
we should correct that the meeting minutes reflect November 18th, not the 14th. And an S should be added for Oaks Ames.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
correct. ES.
Well said.
I've got it open right now. I'm making the changes.
That is a quick correction, Wayne. Thank you. Thank you, Meredith. I appreciate it.
Yep.
So with those items said, Amanda,
Aye.
Meredith,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and I think, Mr. John, did I catch you?
Oh, you didn't. Aye.
Excellent. And Broussard, aye. And I'm just going to open up make sure that we don't have the same errors on the executive minutes. So on the executive session meeting minutes, the date is the 18th. I don't think we have the same example of Oaks being misrepresented. I believe we're good on that. I do believe that the topics that were covered pertain to the previously discussed minutes that we have so far decided not to release. Therefore, I would make a recommendation that we also, in this particular example, make a motion to accept but not release. And so if somebody would like to make a motion as such.
So moved. Lee.
And a second.
And second,
Excellent. Lee hands. So with that, Jim,
Aye.
Greg,
Enjoy.
Ed,
hands high.
Dennis. Thumbs up. John,
Aye.
Amanda,
Varela, aye.
Meredith,
Peach, aye.
and Broussard, aye. Excellent. So that takes care of the minutes on the August 13th, 2020 executive session minutes. I apologize for those. I have not had the opportunity to review those. So with that said, I'll ask that we review those on our next meeting. And if we could carry that over, Stephanie, that would be great. Given the date and the time, I would probably expect we'd be able to hopefully push those through, but I do want to get a handle on those and take a look at those. Okay, so with that, we've taken care of some minutes activity. We do have a discussion point on housing needs survey, the housing production plan, and an update on that. Stephanie, would that be you leading us through that, or Wayne?
Nope, that's going to be Wayne.
Hi, thanks, everybody. So folks may be aware that the town is updating the housing production plan. The state requires that we have an updated one every 5 years. We're currently updating Easton's, hope to have it finalized and accepted by the state within the next couple of months. We have a draft of the housing production plan, and we're working with Old Colony Planning Council. That is the consultant that's doing the work for us on behalf of the Affordable Housing Trust. And they are making some revisions to the draft. We will be discussing that with them next Thursday. There may be a few further revisions. The point of all that is once we have a cleaned up and finalized draft, we're going to hold a public input session on that draft. And that date is probably going to be in, I think, the first half of February at this point. And relative to that, I would strongly encourage everyone here who can to come to that meeting, look for the date and for the Zoom link. It's going to be virtual with input and feedback on the draft plan. Specifically or particularly important would be the planning board, the select board, and of course, the people of the town. The plan goes to the planning board for adoption and then to the select board for adoption, and then it goes to the state for final approval and adoption there. So therefore, it's important to actually get that feedback on the draft plans so that the final one can go back to the boards, reflecting that input. Part of that is there is an online survey. The link is in the agenda that you all have about Easton's housing needs. So if folks have not had a chance to take it yet, please do so. It takes maybe 10 minutes or so. And that input would be helpful in shaping the draft plan. So the take homes are 1, please take the survey, and 2, please stay tuned for the posting of the draft housing production plan and the date for the public feedback meeting on that draft housing production plan.
Excellent, Wayne. Any folks have any questions, thoughts?
I have a question. I got a handout on this survey. I think it was at town meeting,
Yes,
And-
that's the one.
and I filled it out, and
Thank you.
I saw it on the agenda. I went back and they said, "Oh, no, you've already done this before." About how many people have filled it out? I thought it was a very good survey.
Oh, thank you. Really appreciate that. Far fewer than we had hoped. We've been talking it up, posting it wherever we can think to do so, at the library, the handouts at town meeting. So we're hoping to get as much feedback as possible.
If I may comment, I thought it was very user-friendly survey. I think a lot of people get these surveys from everybody in all directions, from businesses, government, and so forth and so forth. So I think they might be maybe, not another one. But again, kudos. It was very easy to navigate through and answer the questions. It was pretty simple. And
Thank you.
well
Thank you. Really appreciate that. I'll specifically give that feedback to the woman at Old Colony who set it up. I think she did a tremendous job, and I agree. I went through it and was like, oh, wow, this is actually useful information and easy to take.
Appreciate those questions. And Wayne, thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Next, we have a series of CPA applications for our May annual town meeting in a series of updates on them. The first item is our town offices restoration project regarding supplemental funds. And I think,
So-
go ahead, Stephanie.
I'm sorry, I was going to say Greg Swan is joining us for that. He had a family commitment and should be joining us shortly. So if we can just move that down on the agenda until Greg gets here.
We certainly can. That brings up a popular item for the Unionville Field revitalization, also the pickleball amendment. So with that, can we get an update on where we're at for this particular item?
Sure, the board will remember that when we went out, originally the cost for the fields for the 6 pickleball courts was around $320,000. That is the money that amount that was approved at town meeting. When we went out to bid, we received 2 responses, one around mid 400,000 and the other over 700,000. So we pulled the bid and regrouped, met with Dick Kelly and Chuck Kramer and the engineer to see where some of that cost overrun came from. Part of it was that they had not the estimate did not cost out the labor at prevailing wages. And the other is consistent with the inflationary costs of goods and services that we're currently experiencing. So they went back out and reevaluated the cost and redid the estimate. And we just received this last week. I've gone through it, seems to reflect the changes that we were talking about. There were a few things that we changed. There were a few things that were taken out. And we asked that they cost out 2 of the courts separately. So provide a cost for 4 courts. And then we can go out with an alt-add bid for the 2 additional courts. So the 4 court cost estimate is $402,180. The 2 additional courts are $96,644.36 each, for a total of $498,824.94. And based on the comments and response from the board at the last meeting, it seemed that everyone seemed to be in support of requesting the additional funds to pay for all 6 courts. So that's what the ask is going to be. That's what the Rec Commission would like to go forward with. And then if the bids still come in too high, see if we can knock it down to the 4. But the idea is to go out with the full, seek the full amount, enough to make up the difference for the full amount.
So $498,000
Right,
and change in total.
right.
Okay.
Oh,
Is-
right. So,
Although that would be less the 320 already
Right.
approved at town meeting, yeah.
it would be the
Correct.
difference between the 320 and the 498,000.
So I think it's like 164, something like that. I think it's like 484,083, everything together, less the 320 brings us to, I think, 164,083. I want to triple check my math on that, but yeah, that's.
And
what
could
the
you just
final
refresh,
application-
Stephanie, any of the items that would have been omitted from the original intentions of the 320 that we should just note and have at our forefront for notes?
Yeah, there was an error in the amount of paving material for one item. That was corrected. Then there were 7 trees along the southern side of the courts that was proposed. Feedback from Dick and Chuck was that, really the trees, while they might provide some shade, would cast leaves in the fall and in debris during windstorms onto the courts and actually be more of a hindrance. In talking with Tana Babbitt from the chair of the Rec Commission, what was decided was to scale back on the trees. Instead of 7, just have 3 and move them further south away from the pickleball court. So you'd still have some shade and respite for other visitors or visitors for the pickleball games to the court. And there were waste receptacles that were quite expensive, over I think they were a couple of $1,000s each. And I was told that the DPW provides their own waste barrels at the different parks throughout the town, and they empty them, and what they do is they bring a clean barrel and swap it out. So we removed those. Dick or Chuck, if you want to chime in there, anything else I might be missing. There was some signage for rules and regulations for the park use and the pickleball court use, which again, that was over $1,000 for that. So that was removed as an item. There are no rules that are going to be posted.
Stephanie, there was a couple of other items that we eliminated to try to get the cost down. There was a sitting area, or a covered sitting area, like a little pavilion, and seating, permanent seating that we had eliminated, and a whole concrete pad housing that was also eliminated. We were planning on putting a shed in and a concrete pad to support it, and that was taken out. So we did a number of things to try to eliminate some of the cost, the overage cost. That still wasn't enough to bring it in line, but we hope to get these other estimates in, and with the additional funds, have this work. These are items that can always be added, and we can live without. People can bring their own chairs, and the shed is a nice place to store certain things, but we have other alternates, alternate ways of doing that. So that was, I think that was the extent of, plus the things that you mentioned.
There's a few more things. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Dick.
Okay. We minimized the walkway to the courts to accommodate
yeah.
the handicap. And so what else did we do? We did some other things too, but I forget what they are now.
It feels like it's fair to say, though, in summary, that the original intent that we went to the town with and that they approved has been preserved with all of the efforts that you've done. And that, in essence, what we've tried to do is to find areas of opportunity to be as thrifty as we could with each dollar, while still preserving the original intent. And feels like we all probably can appreciate that the cost of cheese and steak has gone up, and certainly the cost of construction materials and supplies have dramatically gone up. And so I believe it's fair to say that your sentiment that was expressed, Stephanie, applies to all of the committee members. But I do want to reserve the right for everybody to have an opportunity just to confirm that, and that we are all in agreement that we have been able to preserve the essence, and it does make sense for us to go back to the town and to get this very, I think, highly appreciated asset developed on the town's behalf. So I do just want to give everybody an open forum to either ask questions or add comments or thoughts that you all might be having as well.
I have a question, Tom.
Certainly.
So the seating area in the shed, it didn't seem like a lot of money that would be deducted from the original bid, but could that be worked into somehow through donations? Someone want to donate seating and so forth?
I would think it could. I would think a private donation could potentially be made after the fact and separate from the process. I'm sure it could be made during and throughout the process as well. But that's a fair question. Does any of the plan changes that we've made preclude us from potentially adding on some items that were removed if we were able to source the funding in a private way?
No, as Chuck was mentioning, those particular items, the seating area and the pad for a box or shed, could be added afterwards.
I hate to see a project that's going to be of this extent and then some of the finishing touches missing. So just a thought. So just to reiterate, getting back to, so there was originally, so we're going to be short one court based on this proposal, or it's going to be full all the courts?
The total amount that we just quoted, the total cost, and again, as Wayne pointed out, this isn't the amount, the additional amount that's going to be sought, which is the difference between the original grant award and the total cost. The total cost for all 6 courts is estimated at $498,824.
And I think the question you would ask, the original intent was for 6 pickleball courts.
Oh, yeah.
And that includes
Sorry,
the 6
yeah.
pickleball courts. So some of the support infrastructure is what we attempted to eliminate to get the cost in line.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question,
Yes, sir.
and it's unrelated to the cost of the project and the number of courts. I support that. But increasing the number of courts is clearly going to increase the amount of participation. What's the parking situation there? Is that covered?
Yes, the new plan, the plan all along has included expanded parking and formalized parking.
And that would be public parking?
Yes, it's on, because right now a lot of people are parking at Union Villa, but this will be town parking, and it will be available to anyone visiting the facility.
That includes 2 handicap parking spaces, as well as the additional parking and walkways to the courts, and also drainage swales that are designed into the project.
Anybody else? Questions, thoughts, observations? I know it's an issue that's been much discussed, so.
I guess that my only question, and I think if costs continue to rise and you've cut every possible source there is to cut, are we going to be back in the same boat? Would we be better off leaving some of that in?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. And And I know in public work, private work as opposed to public work, we always put a contingency on whatever bids we get. Preliminary prices of either 10 or 15%. And that will help absorb whatever cost increases happen in the next year that I imagine this project will be before it actually gets built. So that's something you could consider, taking this number and putting 10% onto it, and that would absorb that cost that you're talking about, or it should.
Stephanie, do we have an accepted policy, or team? Do we have an accepted policy on projects that there is a percentage that we would allocate for? a
I'm
contingency
going to
basis?
punt to Greg Swan on that one, who has joined us. Greg, did you
Greg,
hear the
good to see you.
question?
You're muted.
Could you
Go
please
ahead.
repeat it?
The question is there kind of a standard policy for an inflation factor on bids?
I tend to, there's not a policy, it's a good practice to carry at least 10% of, for contingency. And then as you get closer to, once the project is bid and you see what the numbers come in at, you kind of recognize where your possible trouble spots are going to be. And once you get through that part of construction, you can start writing down contingency and having money left over. I don't like going into a project without having contingency because it's asking for trouble. But I think 10% is a good rule of thumb. If you want to be a little more conservative, 15%. 20% is carried usually during planning phases. It was somebody asked me how much it's going to cost. I come up with a number and add 20% and say that's kind of what I think it is. But I think 10% would be reasonable based on the engineer's estimate.
So 10% would be, and that would be 10% of the entire project, which is estimated, if Wayne's numbers are correct, 484,000. It would be an additional 48,000.
No, it's 498. 825.
I was wrong. Stephanie was right. Yeah. It's 498, 825.
Okay.
Right.
Can I ask a question, Stephanie? Was there an asphalt escalation included in this contract?
I don't know the answer to that
Okay,
question.
so that's going to be something that you'd want to look at, because that kind of takes care of, asphalt prices fluctuate based on oil price, gasoline prices. It's the moving component of it. We include that in all of our contracts. And that kind of gets soaked up in the contingency. But if the estimate right now is for 500,000, if you carried, oh boy, is there a police item in there, Stephanie?
I think so. I don't have the, let's see.
Okay, you tend to carry 10% for contingency, you carry 8% for police, not maybe as much for this one because it is an offsite, you're not in the roadway. So 4 or 5% would suffice.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, if you carried, if the engineer's estimate is 500,000, 550 wouldn't be unreasonable. I'd feel more comfortable with 565. But this is a very straightforward project in so much as the only thing you might not know what the costs are is if you start digging and then you run into some unsuitable materials. Everything else should be pretty fixed in your concrete costs and your material costs and your labor cost. You shouldn't, once you get to a point of you've excavated for the base of the courts and you kind of laid the sub base out, the parts that we can't see right now, once you get that all set, it should be pretty smooth sailing.
I haven't heard smooth sailing in construction projects in my world in the same sentence in quite a while. So well played, Greg. So it sounds like the smart money would be for us, especially given the history of the project, to potentially go back and ask for 565,000 in total, having already asked for 320. It would be an additional ask of $245,000, and would look for reaction from people for that amount.
Thomas,
Yeah.
if I can speak.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, when are the bids going to go out? Are they going to go out in February?
We would like them to go out in February. I have to talk to town council to see if we can do that when the full funds have not been appropriated. So we may have to wait until town meeting, but I will be talking about that with town council on Tuesday.
Well,
Stephanie,
ideally-
if I may,
Yes,
it is routine, as long as it's written into the contract, that you're upfront with the contractor saying that your funds won't be available until, you can't break ground until July 1st.
yeah.
You can bid this project before
Actually,
town meeting, and then you go
if
in
it-
and you get the money,
yeah.
and then as long as it's all there, then you can sign the contract.
Okay, so that's what I thought, but Connor wanted me to just make sure that, so.
Well, hopefully,
And so that's been the plan all along, is that as soon as we get the bid documents revised, which I'm told we'll have Monday, and to review, and we've reviewed them, then we can go out to bid with that, that stipulation.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Greg that we want real numbers, I think, to bring to the town. This is a cost estimate by an estimator and not by an actual contractor. And I think you'd be a lot better off with real numbers when you go to the town.
If I may, Tom, also,
Please, John.
I'm 100% in agreement for this project, but I'm squeamish. Is there that much business out there that we can't get in locked in? I know we're trying to get it locked in, the pricing, but we're already within 15 minutes of conversation, already $65,000 higher than what we were. And just within a year, we're almost double where we were then. It's making me nervous and skittish about where are we going to be? And we've seen this project after project, and they come back to the drawing board, and we need another 50 or 100 or $200,000. I'm exaggerating these numbers for this project, but
You're not exaggerating those for this project.
John, your question just cost us another 100,000. Could you hurry up?
it's just,
Jesus, my taxes are going through the roof. Let's go. Be concise.
it's,
So I guess, John, are you saying we should seek
I'm
ways
just-
to mitigate the cost?
I'm sorry.
Are you saying we should seek ways to mitigate this particular price tag?
I think that our applicants have done their due diligence on this, but just in my heart of hearts, I'm just concerned with the way costs are and projects that are coming forward. We can't afford to not get this completely locked down with whoever's going to do this project, where we're going to come up with another 50,000 or another 100,000. I mean, there's only so much money to go around, and we've got multiple projects coming up.
So,
with that, I have
and that was-
concern.
Yeah, great, John, and if I could respond, I mean, that was part of the reason we really wanted to go out to bid in February and not wait till the spring to walk in, to get someone who had the bandwidth to do the work, because we think that that may have been part of the reason we only got 2 responses, and to lock in the price.
Stephanie,
Yes.
where do they stand right now? The bid docs are not ready. The specifications are not ready right now.
There are just a few minor updates that need to be made based on the revisions that we've made. So they just wanted to make sure, Holmgren's office, that we had everything and agreed with it. I met with Scott this morning. We went through it, and they're updating the plan set and the bid docs, and we will have them on Monday.
Okay, can Chuck and I get a copy of that next
Yeah,
week?
absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so there's really no reason why we couldn't put this out for bid by the end of February, right? Stephanie?
That, I don't see why not.
Okay, so then we'll have our bids before the May meeting, town meeting, so we'll know exactly where we stand.
Very good point.
Yeah, I think we all want to make sure that we get the bids in so that we can get as accurate a number as we are. Is there any other commentary from the public in terms of items that we should, as a committee, be keeping in mind? I do want to afford the committee an opportunity to have some uninterrupted dialogue and chat and discussion around the amount and around the attributes of the particular program. But Dick, Chuck, is there anything else you'd like us to understand about the current process as it is, or the current proposal?
I think we've reviewed most of our concerns. And as soon as we see the final bid documents, and if there are any comments on it, we'll get right back to Stephanie. And then just send it out to bid. That's what we're concerned with, is to make sure it does go out and you can get accurate numbers. We've covered all the other points, I believe.
Excellent. And Stephanie, if you could just let me know on any commentary that comes back. And
Mhm.
when we have the final bid documents, I'd love to get an eye on those as well. That would be great.
Yeah.
And then I agree. I think it's in all of our best interest to get them out, get actual bids, and get some concreteness and definition. To John's point, the market's moving pretty fast, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Okay, so thank you, Chuck and Dick. I appreciate it. I do want to spend some time just to dedicate and ask the committee if there are any either rebuttals or additional comments regarding the point that John validly made regarding the escalation or potential estimated of cost. I know it is an estimate. We don't have the actual bids back, but I do think it might warrant just a little bit of initial discussion where people's minds might be at. I do agree, the more money we go back to, the more the ask, and therefore the town may want to review it in detail, and we want them to be supportive. So questions or thoughts on what John pointed out about the cost escalation and going back to town residents for more?
If I could start, I think that anyone that is going to balk when they see that pickleball is back on the town meeting warrant for another large sum, they're going to have those feelings regardless of whether the number has the extra 10% in or not. And I would much rather, I really appreciate the effort that's been made to trim down the nice to have list. But I do worry that that's left very little wiggle room for you. So I would be in favor of the somewhat, with having some contingency funds built in. And what I don't want to see is having to go back a third time, because that's when people really start to lose it.
Good point. Thanks, Amanda. Ed?
I'm going to channel my inner Lee Williams and say someday somebody is going to take notice that we always seem to do this. And this is a big jump from what was originally proposed. And maybe they will notice this time. Another way to fund this without getting additional money is to look at the bid documents, would say 4 and then add 1, add 2. Well, you might want to take 1 off to make up that difference. I think the point is well taken. We want to get the 6. I think the point's well taken. Get those bid documents out, get the bids, and come back in February and find out just how close we are to what we have now, and ask for the minimum. And if the amount continues to be huge, we might want to think about cutting back.
Can I jump in as rec
Please,
representative?
Meredith. Go ahead.
Certainly, I tend to be, I think, fiscal conservative on this board, and $500,000 is a lot of money for pickleball courts. There's no question about that. But I want to remind everyone of 2 pieces. One, the pickleball folks have been working on this for, I'd say, about 5 years.
Mhm.
That's 5 years of time, labor, energy on many fronts. And midway through the process, the pandemic hit and prices absolutely soared through the roof. I myself saw that with a kitchen renovation that I wanted to do that is not done. There are items on there that I can't get done. And so because of those cost overrides, that stalled out as well, along with many other projects. We have developers in town who lost their shirt because they were under agreement at a certain price. And when supply and cost went through the roof, they were held to those contracts. And this is no different. So I just want to remind everyone of special consideration for these costs were certainly not planned for, nor could they ever in a million years have been anticipated. And it's just a function of the pandemic. So yes, I can imagine people at town meetings saying, where did these costs come from? They are a direct correlation to the pandemic pricing.
And if I could, Meredith, just a point of clarification, you mentioned 500,000. Would you not be for, or would you be against the increase for of the, I think we're going to add $75,000 as, or 65,000 as contingency. Would you be for contingency?
I think a contingency is always a wise idea, but
Okay.
the board's feeling when we met the other night is we want to move forward with this project.
Understood.
We have a lot of folks who want these pickleball courts. They've been working tirelessly to get them. They will be used. And unfortunately, there are cost overrides, but what we don't want to happen is continue to stall them out on getting started on this project.
Thank you, Meredith. Ed, I think you wanted to make a
Yeah,
comment.
I don't think anybody wants to stall them out. We want to get this project done this year, but as you point out, Meredith, costs have gone up everywhere. And for the normal householder, you know, you can't afford steak, you eat chicken. So let's not give everybody a blank check to keep increasing these costs. And I don't like the sound of me as a fiscal conservative, but you know, at some point we're going to get there, I think.
I think we appreciate the sentiments of both. I do believe the bid itself will enable us to actually understand what the full project is, while also understanding what I believe you said 4 and 2, Stephanie, is what you
Yes.
were going to do. Ed, I know you said 4, 1, and 1, but is 4 and 2 an acceptable, or would you prefer that the bid said 4, 1, and 1 so we could have that type of fine tuning capability?
Well, I want to make the point that the last time we talked about this, a strong case was made that it makes more sense to get all 6 now rather than do 4 and then add 2 on later. So let's be wise, get the bids out, get some real numbers back, and then decide next month.
Well, okay, it's just important to make sure what we are asking for them to bid on reflects. And so Stephanie, I'd ask that you make the bid 4 and 2.
The plan was 4, and then each of the next 2 courts would be individual adults.
Okay.
Or all dads. I always say it incorrectly, but it's so we have a cost for each of those. I did, when I was going through the cost, I did lump them together, but we do have them broken out as separate costs.
Excellent. Thank you.
So yes, that was the plan. So
Jim, did you have any thoughts or comments that you wanted to add?
Not at this time, no. I think it's time to move forward. Let's just
Appreciate
decide to
it.
do it.
Not sure if you can use, hopefully you can talk, because I'm not sure thumb language would get us all the way through, but.
That would be difficult. Can you hear me?
oh, we can, Dennis.
Well, I
Excellent.
switched computers midstream there, so.
Well played.
I'd like to back Meredith's notion there that I can see Bert Lewis is listening to us tonight, and I know that he brought this notion before this board a long time ago, and they've hit one roadblock after another through this whole ordeal. And I personally just hope that things come back in their favor and that they're once and for all able to get this project completed and enjoy themselves playing pickleball.
Thank you, sir. Greg?
Enough talking, build the damn thing.
Excellent.
You know,
Okay.
I mean,
So
I
think we have
wonder
our-
what the engineer is being paid to reduce pavement by 2 feet is probably more than what has been saved. You know, Meredith, everybody's talked about it. This is the issue with municipalities building versus private enterprise. I'm surprised. I just assumed there was a contingency built into every single one of them. Let's build all 6 of them. Let's get it done. So tired of talking about it. I thought we were going to have this in 3 years ago. It's not going to get any cheaper. I'd put the seating area, fine, get rid of the trees. I'd put everything else up. Add 100,000. Let's be done with it. You know, let's go build it. And
Right.
honestly, if this board cannot sell the reasons this happened at town meeting, then we shouldn't be on this board. It would be an easy sale. Most people are on Novocaine going through town meeting, all due respect to my fellow town.
Well-
And you know what, if someone were to get up and argue against it, well, they're probably gonna argue against anything. And again, if this board cannot, and the folks that have supported this cannot defeat that at town meeting, I'd be surprised.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I think we're all focused and working hard to make sure that whatever we do put forth and spend town, these funds, we would do so wisely and thoughtfully, and certainly give credit to those people that have put forth the recommendations. So Dick, Chuck, Bert, appreciate you all and your efforts and for joining us each night. And great things sometimes take a lot of time and effort. This one seems to take a little bit longer, but we're all working hard to get there. So with that, I think it's probably an opportunity to move on. I do know the first item was the town offices restoration. I'm appreciative that Lynn's here, and Greg, thank you so much for joining as well. If it's okay, we'll circle back to that, and that way it'll enable them to free up the rest of their evening. So with that, Greg, could we just get an update on where we're at in the town offices supplemental fund request?
Of course. Good evening, everybody. It's so good to see you again. I was actually just thinking about this particular project, and this was the last meeting I had in person before the pandemic set in and set us all into this Zoom, the Zoom condition. So it's nice to see everybody. I'm looking forward to see everybody again in person. With that being said, we're going to move on to town hall exterior repairs. Lynn is here with SSV Architects. They've been holding our hands through this whole process. They put together a great set of plans and bid specs. We opened sub bids yesterday for painting and roofing. They came in about where they thought where they would be. Roofing was we budgeted 180,000. It came in at 200,000. And painting came in a little bit. It came in on the low bid came in about where we wanted it to be, but the general contractor is under no obligation to use that bid. So what the real trick is going to be is 2 weeks from yesterday, January 26th, we're going to open the contract to see what we're at. I'm not going to, I can get into it if you'd like, but I'm going to, because this project has taken, the original estimate was done, I want to say we started it 4 years ago. It was 3 years ago since Lynn put the budget together. We took estimates on escalation. Some of those numbers were inadequate based on pandemic and inflation. We're getting squeezed. We had put in bid alts to segment it to fit the budget. We currently have $1.45 million. If we just do the base bid, we'll replace all the gutters, we'll do the windows, we'll do the front vestibule, we'll do some of the roofing, but we'll only do the windows on the north side of the building. We have bid alts built into this, so we can do then the windows that when you approach the main entrance, we can do that, then the east and west side windows. So we do have alternates built in. The contractors approached those as we thought they would. Some high, some low, but kind of it's in the ballpark. Now, I will be the first one to admit, you're going to ask me, why do we have cost escalation? I can point some of the fingers at this, at escalation, at inflation and pandemic. But there were a couple of things that happened is because it took us 4 years to get around to this point. The gutters on the building, we had originally planned on lining them. The gutters have deteriorated to the point where that's no longer feasible. We have to replace them in kind. So there was a cost escalation with that. And the second point is when we went back and we checked for asbestos in and around the windows, we found out that it was a little more widespread, a lot more widespread than we thought. So there's going to be an additional cost there. Based on the current estimate right now, if we just go with the base bid, we're going to be close. We're carrying a 15% contingency right now. We will come in at the 1.45 million, what was originally budgeted. If we want to do all of the windows, the estimate currently stands, we'd need an additional $300,000 to bring it up to 1.75. But because we're going to be opening the contracts with the general contractor in 2 weeks, we can get actual real hard numbers to you to go to town meeting with in a couple of weeks. In this climate right now, I don't want to even venture a guess as to what those numbers are going to come out to be. If the committee wants to wait to find out what those numbers are going to be, and they, if they're favorable, if they're reasonable, that would be great. But I'll defer to you guys on what you want to do based on what we find out on Wednesday, the 26th.
Sounds like we're trying to get bids in the pickleball court to get hard numbers. Appears it might make sense to wait 2 weeks here to do the same.
Yeah, I wish we had had this meeting on the 27th, because then I could have come in and said, here you go, this is what it is, order off the menu and let's get done what we need to get done.
Sure.
I do want to add on that town DPW forces are undertaking certain aspects of this project to help drive down the cost. But we just we're not vertical historical construction experts. And that's one of the things about this particular project that's causing costs, why it's so expensive. We have a historical nature to this building. It's a great landmark to have, to use as our town hall. But there are caveats that come with that. And the cost of repairs is one of them. But once we get these repairs in, once we strip out the lead paint, once we get in the new windows, DPW forces can maintain this building under our operating budget. So it's that lift to get there right now.
Any questions for Greg or Lynn? Did you have any points that the team wanted to have added? Or are you here for moral support to help Greg out?
Well, let me just say, I think Greg did a very good job of describing the situation. So I will simply say, great job. I think the points are, continued weathering, the asbestos, the gutter situation, and the current sort of COVID-related inflation and supply and labor issues. So we've got fingers crossed. We worked hard to sort of divide the project into a series of very constructive alternates, but it is going to be a reality. And I think the idea of resetting the clock on this building by actually removing the lead, removing the asbestos, getting to the point where it's solid state and the town forces can maintain it makes a huge amount of sense. Huge amount of sense.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Anybody in the committee that wants to ask a question, make a thought, observation?
I have one, actually several observations. As the historical wing of CPA, quite obvious, I want this building done. I mean, it's been in decay for decades. It has to be addressed. As Meredith so well said, as the conservative wing of CPA, I'm also in that corner. It bothers me, and I've stated this, and I'm probably going to as long as I'm a member of CPA. And Wendy Nightingale had addressed this when I had asked her at a meeting or two ago, that I feel that CPA is becoming the capital funding committee of our town, because we don't have the funding that should have been laid decades ago to maintain these buildings. I'm nervous and apprehensive that we're heading in that direction. And it seems, because of the bidding process, that when the applications come in, they're at a certain basic price, but by the time it gets to this point, we're way over. And again, it's nobody's fault here.
Sean, can I speak to that real quick?
Sure.
One of the hard parts about putting these projects together and then coming to you guys is you guys look for applications in November, and then we go to town meeting in May, and it's very hard to ask contractors to hold their prices for 7 months to bring those numbers to you. Whereas if you guys change the application process a little bit, and I don't know how feasible this is, but you could ask for projects in January, February, and then approve the meetings in April. That's more regular, is where you bid the project in April with the contractor already having everything lined up, getting the approval at town meeting. I'm not blaming anybody for this, but I'm saying that's one of the hard parts about doing this, is that all we have is, we have our best guess estimates, and more often than not, they pan out, but sometimes they don't. We're having 2 examples of that right now. One with the pickleball courts, and the other one, no fault of anybody's, nobody could have seen that happening. But something the committee might want to take into consideration is to, instead of voting, getting these applications in November, pushing everything back 3 or 4 months to help with so I can actually I would prefer to come in here saying this project is going to cost me $200,000. I have a 20% contingency in here because very unsuitable nature of the project. I'm looking for $250,000. I have the number the contractor is going to do it for. Instead of saying, I think, I guess, which I hate doing, but because the way it's set up, that's what I have to do right now. Just food for thought. I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to answer any questions about that moving forward, but it might behoove the CPC and any board to just take a look at that and just shifting these times around.
It's a valid point, and I see it, but see where my position, my thought process is, where we're funding all of these projects and there's zero money in capital funding for any of these projects. I've always been, well, maybe we should do X amount of dollars from capital funding to assist in CPA funding and work jointly, where we're becoming where it's 100% CPA. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm 100% for doing this. This falls under CPA guidelines. It's a no-brainer, but I'm just concerned, being also fiscally conservative, where this is all going in the future, where our budget is going to be going, for our decaying historical buildings.
John, if I could jump in, I agree with you completely. And I think what needs to be counted here for that is unique to Easton is we've got big old antique buildings that are incredibly expensive to maintain. And I don't know what kind of conversation that would be as far as a special, for the main budget, but most communities don't have these, as we know, and that's why we love them. But they definitely are an added cost. It'd be no different if you owned an antique home, or if you ever have, what's involved with maintaining and updating them. Everything is special order. So maybe if that's a way to get it done, I don't think we're just talking about buildings that were built in the 70s.
Yeah. A good point, but let's just say we didn't have CPA. What would we do?
I agree. We do have a capital fund. We do capital projects in town. I think we all know the list, for those of you that have seen it, is very lengthy, and that there are a lot of items that are on it that we aren't able to get to. I think that's valid. There are though capital funds, just to make sure folks and anybody that happens to listen to it know. Fair points. Thank you, John, Meredith, and Greg. Really appreciate that insight as well. Always good to try to understand how we can better interact. Ed, I think you have a hand raised.
Yeah, supporting John and Meredith, I think we've had over a number of years a debate between what should be funded out of the capital budget and what should be funded out of CPA. And I think the unfortunate part of the town hall is that it falls within both things. It's a historic building, and that is something that CPA can get involved in. The one thing that chilled my soul a little bit was when Greg said, oh, and then the DPW can do maintenance afterwards. We heard that same thing about the turf field at the high school, and it didn't quite pan out. So are you willing to sign in blood that DPW can handle maintenance after we get everything squared away for you?
I can tell you that right now we're not allowed to touch the windows because it's contaminated and it's lead, and we don't have the personnel to do that. We don't have the facilities. We don't have the funding. We put these windows in, and then it's just a coat of latex every year. And we can send out, our 2 painters, to cover, to paint and spot and touch up, and it's not a problem handling it. It's not safe right now. It's a hazmat issue, and we're gonna have to pay to have that removed, along with the asbestos. It's this expensive because we've waited this long. It is what it is.
To me, that when you were talking numbers, that the potential cost overrun as a percentage of the project is actually smaller than the cost overrun on the pickleball project. Well, we'll have to wait and see what the numbers are.
I don't, from a percentage, they're two different projects. I don't want to speak, we're so close at this point. I don't want to say one thing and then have it bite me 2 weeks later. But right now, it's looking, it's so hard right now in this climate to guess what the general contractors are doing. Some of the money, you know, we had 2 general bids come in very high for the sub bidders, but they're limiting it to their own guys. So they could be putting all their money into these 2 very important parts of the project, and then their general sub bid comes in less than everybody else. They win the bid. It's just the way they play the game. It's the way they, you know, they divvy up the cash and they do their bottom line stuff. And it's too soon to tell. But if you give me 2 weeks, I will have numbers. I will have a recommendation that I can give to Stephanie and to Tom and to everybody on the board here and say, listen, this is what it's going to cost. This is how much more we need. Contingency's already been baked into that. So that'll be a bottom line number. We'll talk to the contractor and make sure everybody's on board with what we're planning on doing. And we'll figure out a course of action from there. I think that's the most prudent thing, but again, I defer to the board and what their wishes are.
No, Greg, I think that makes sense. I think it would probably help us having the hard numbers. That way we can have a good informed debate and understand the merits of all aspects. Unless anybody feels strongly differently, I would recommend we undergo that course of action. And if that's the case and there are no further comments or questions, we can revisit at our next meeting, get the information back, share it, and come to some consensus at that point with some hard numbers. All right, hearing no objections. Greg, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Lynn, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining.
I'm staying.
Oh, you're more than welcome to stay. Fantastic.
I've got
I just wanna
another
say-
reason to stay.
I just want to say it's really good to see everybody. I'm glad to see everybody's happy and healthy, especially in this new year. We have a lot going on in town. We're trying to make it a bigger and better place to live every single day. And if anybody has any questions about what's going on and they see anything, you have any questions about it, please don't hesitate to give me or Stephanie a call.
Thanks, Greg. And do us a favor, please say hi to everybody at the DPW, express our appreciation for everything that they do for us.
Oh,
And,
it's our pleasure. We love our jobs.
Well said. All right, thank you.
Can we have a group hug?
Here.
Only if you start, Greg, only if you start. Okay, so next up, if I can pull up my agenda, I think we have a discussion on the Southeastern Cemetery fence amendment.
Hi, thanks. Folks may remember that several months ago, the group agreed it would make sense that the Southeastern Cemetery fence, the Southeastern Cemetery group complete the project. They got a grant to do the southern 2/3 of the fence, and they would like to complete replication, the missing part, and finish up the northern 1/3. So to that end, they got some updated cost estimates from the mason who needs to put in footings. They've done all the brick pillars the entire length, but some cement footings for the fence. And they got an updated estimate from D'Angelo's Ironworks. And it's looking at about $105,000 for the masonry and to replicate 90 feet of fence plus 2 spare sections of fence. Not every, I don't know the frequency, folks might have a little more familiarity with it, but there are car crashes and sometimes bits of the fence get damaged. That's how they lost several sections in the past. So they thought it would be prudent to get a couple of extra sections.
There are car accidents. Does their insurance reimburse us for the cost of the section that we use to replace?
If I may speak to that, we had that situation at the old high school on Lincoln Street, where the insurance payment for the damage did not cover the expense of replicating a historically authentic piece of fencing, and that's
I
why.
assume in that case, Ed, we didn't go after personally with the personal suit to get the rest of the money.
That's correct. It was a young person, and they chose not to.
Understood. Wayne, thank you for the update. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments? general sentiment, this is something that that price is still something we would feel in general support of?
I noticed there's another fence thing here on the agenda. One of the things about deferring the issue of cost, as we've been doing, is we don't want to run out of money before we make up our minds on all the projects. So with that in mind, I think $105,000 is a wonderful cost to finish up what's turned out to be a very nice project. So I would support it.
Thank you. We'll have the final application, of course, for the February meeting and the final number. So it may be a little bit off the 105, but 105 is what it's looking like. We got an estimate at 93,100 for the 90 feet. And then we're waiting for an estimate for the 2 additional sections, but it's probably going to be about that.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, Wayne, thank you so much. Next up on the agenda, we have an Affordable Housing Trust update.
Hi again, that's me. I think we talked about this in a previous meeting and also previous in this meeting, earlier in this meeting, the housing production plan update and an action plan associated with that. So the Affordable Housing Trust, similar to last year, will be requesting the 10% community housing set aside. And I got updated numbers just this afternoon from Wendy Nightingale, and that would be $202,500. So that will be the application from the Affordable Housing Trust. And that funds programs and projects. There's going to be probably partnering with a nonprofit to develop some affordable family housing on a couple of parcels the trust acquired, as well as other projects that they're working on.
Thank you, Wayne. Frequent caller tonight. Appreciate the efforts. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, considerations on the Affordable Housing Trust that they'd like to raise? Moving right along, hearing none. Next up is Oaks Ames Memorial Hall with an ES, has been highlighted appropriately so. So if we could get that conversation started up for an update. Stephanie, go ahead.
So
Stephanie.
Wayne and Stephanie, tell me where I stand.
So the quick overview, I think this group had discussed a 2-phase approach for Oaks Ames. This first ask for this upcoming Springtown meeting would be getting the construction plans and specs and cost estimates as a discrete project now, which then in a future town meeting would complete all of the outstanding work, including the parking lot at the hall. And of course, factoring in the inflation that we've been talking about as well. So the immediate application would be to get the construction docs and these cost estimates done and a rough idea of what the remaining construction work would be, and then build support and fine tune those numbers and see how one could possibly phase the work, break it up or what have you as a discussion in the next year or two for the second ask to complete all of the outstanding work identified in the 2015 comprehensive needs assessment. And so tonight we've got Fred and Lynn from the hall to maybe talk a little bit more detail. My understanding is the ask for this application would be, help me, Linda, I think it's like 472.
Sure, I can jump in.
Yeah, please.
That will
Thank you.
help, sure. So bear with me because I'm not sure how many of you have had the chance to look at the 2015 master plan, but I just want to give a little bit of a frame of reference. Community Preservation funded that master plan, which was conducted in 2014 and 15. It looked comprehensively at all aspects of the hall, from masonry issues to windows to historic finishes, such as the ceiling of the Masonic room upstairs. It also looked at what it meant to make the hall fully accessible and up to code in all aspects of life safety. And it looked at heating and air conditioning. It was, 2 volumes of big weighty document. And fortunately, through the efforts of the Fred Ames and the association with support from community preservation, approximately $700,000 worth of work has been done on the exterior of the building since that 2015 master plan. The master plan estimate in 2015 for the overall needs of the hall was $6.5 million. And so what we're coming to you tonight for is to look at the rest of the story, the work that still remains outstanding. And as Wayne has mentioned, that includes things like a new HVAC, a new heating system, and along with it, air conditioning, an elevator so that folks can move from the first floor to the second floor with the grand hall upstairs. It deals with electrical issues. We need to do a service upgrade, so we have adequate service for the elevator and the air conditioning and the lighting. But it's time to strip out the old knob and tube, which remains in this building, in certain portions of the building, and rewire the building. So it is actually safe, not only for the occupants, but it's protected from any possible problems with wiring issues. So there's a long range of things that still remain outstanding. One of the key parts of this story has to do with parking and site access. In 2019, Fred Ames was able to secure a planning grant from the Massachusetts Cultural Facilities Fund, and that developed a business plan and identified, really what it would take to have the hall be self-sustaining from its function rental income. And that reinforced air conditioning, handicapped access, beautiful finishes, and adequate parking. The master plan in 2015 looked at what it meant to develop parking on the area behind the hall, portions of the land which is owned by the town of Easton. And so the concept that we are now working with is one that was advanced in a conversation we had with Stephanie and Wayne and Connor this autumn, where we said, conceptually, what if the land was leased through an appropriate procurement process to the association, and they were responsible for developing the parking lot on land owned by the town. And that has implications for all kinds of implications for procurement and cost and so on. So today, what we've done is updated the cost estimates to contemporary dollars as much as we can as architects, as well as added in some of the things that we really would like to have done but hadn't included in that 2015 estimate. And for that, I will use as an example the fabulous ceiling of the Masonic Hall, which is the only surviving original painted surface in the hall. Everything else has been treated over time. That ceiling is H.H. Richardson's vision for what that space should be, with the Masonic Lodge that occupied it. And so we've added that conservation into this project. So today we are looking at the potential of $8.5 million to, quote, finish the story here. What I've heard tonight reinforces why we are actually coming forward with this recommendation, and that is that we engage the engineers, the designers to prepare the plans and specs for that whole project to the 75% level. That's pretty detailed. That's in fact quite detailed. And then send that out to an independent cost estimator who is experienced with this, that this is the only thing they do with cost estimating that work. That is short of actually going to bid and securing bids, that's the closest that we feel is a prudent way of coming up with what the capital cost would ultimately be. And so the application that we put forward asked for $472,000 for that design work. That buys engineers, that buys structural engineers, mechanical engineers, landscape architects, geotechnical engineers, because we know we've got ledge back there and we're going to have to deal with that, conservators and so on. And I know that this is a substantial request. I happen to chair community preservation in my town, and I know that parsing out and making priorities is one of the difficult parts that this committee is faced with doing. But Oaks Ames Hall is one of the glories of Easton. And this is, we think, a responsible way of helping secure its future and its future preservation. And the ability to actually generate revenues from the rental of functions, as well as providing space for community meetings and activities. So thank you for that. We've given an estimate based on construction costs. But what the plan is that we would come back in about a month's time with as detailed a breakdown of tasks and fees and involvement of consultants as possible. So I'm sure there's plenty of questions.
Any questions for Lynn?
How much of the cost is associated with the parking?
The parking, so I can tell you, in fact, this is one of the attachments that we included with this application. So the parking lot itself is estimated at about $1 million. And that would provide, that is not only the parking lot, but that also links the campus of Oaks Ames Hall and the library together with both an accessible walkway that goes down to the library parking lot, as well as a pedestrian walkway with steps. And I think the thing that I think is so important is to actually get this into the design work, so we understand just what the site conditions are back there. If you walk back there, you see that there's, and in fact, this is going to be a significant change, and we hope one that can be done in a sensitive way, but there will be some leveling for the ledge, as well as tree removal to provide parking spaces for 60, I think it's 50 cars. That's what the current kind of schematic design is. And that's what was available in the master, and that's what's contained in the master plan.
I'm sorry, what number of cars did you say?
50.
Any other questions, thoughts, observations for Lynn?
I just have, I know, having talked to people around town, that whenever they hear we need money for planning, it always seems like it's pie in the sky, this, that, and the other thing. What I would like to see the hall do is make it very clear to everybody that we're finally there. We all know that there's this big chunk that we've been putting off. Greg's been telling us for years, we should do it all at once and cut the cost down. Well, we didn't do that, and now we're at $8 million. But I think everybody in town wants to get that project done. We're not asking this year for planning documents. We're asking for documents that would begin the construction process. It's more than just planning. So we got to get that message across, and we also have to get the message across that next year the big ask is going to be coming. And we've always asked for the proponents of ideas to come up with some kind of a match. And I think a strong publicity campaign. Now we're ready. Here it comes. This is going to be the thing that is the end of the revitalization of Northeastern, something John and I have waited 50 years to see. You gotta sell it.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Ed, that your point is well taken. When I say plans and specifications, I really do mean bid documents. So the kinds of documents that we've prepared, for instance, for the Easton Town offices would be an example. I also will say that we have been through a grant that you had awarded. We are near the end of preparing the plans and specs for the elevator and the HVAC work to, again, that 75% level. So that's out, and our cost estimator as part of the contract we already have with you. We're having that cost estimated right now. And in the number, in the proposal that I've given you, I've shown the credit, if you will, I've shown that credit, if you will, for the current project against the overall design fee, which could rise on $1 million. So I've got $1 million, which is based on, percentages of construction costs in that spreadsheet. And then I've backed out what you've already granted as a grant. And then I have a net number, and then I've done a percentage of, based on what the level of effort, the typical level of effort would be to get to a 75% number. And my intention is to take that to a more granular level, so you can see, the spreadsheet in a spreadsheet, a detailed breakdown of that.
I don't think this will be a surprise to anyone who's heard me on this topic before. And this is, I think there are two issues with the parking. People are going to have a visceral reaction to the notion of there being a 50 spot parking lot, parking structure, whatever it is, where that's proposed. I understand that people are desperate to resolve downtown's parking issues. I get that completely, but that is going to be a really emotionally charged issue, both for the abutters and for people who are used to that area looking the way it looks now. And then I also, we've been around and around on this before. I don't think it's an appropriate use of CPA funding to address the town's parking needs under the guise of it being a historic property. I'm all for the preservation of the building. The ceiling, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Spend all the money on that, but I do have a real issue, kind of dovetailing with what Ed said about using it for the town hall. I've raised that issue before too, but this really, I've read the opinion. It seems like a real stretch to me.
You, Amanda? Anybody else?
John? I do actually, Tom. Lynn, excellent presentation. You hit all the points spot on. I've lived in town 36 years. I've seen this building decay. Every year, more and more and more, and we keep talking about it. Fred, his board, volunteers have tried tirelessly to bring it to it. They've done a good job, but it's not there yet. I know this has to be done. We can't afford to wait another 5 or 10 years because it will be dust. From what I feel and what I've heard from people in the community, what would help, sidelining the parking for a moment, would be, and I know this was addressed in 2015, usage. If you can, Fred, if you can get a defined usage where they can see real bona fide cash being generated, not relying just on functions, although I think that would be increased tenfold by exactly what Lynn had presented tonight, between fixings and air conditioning and access to the whole building, et cetera. Define that issue, and it will be so much easier to sell to the public. Say, listen, this is the proposal. We're going to spend this money. Number one, it's an icon of our community. It's the last hurrah, but we can generate $50,000 a year by bringing in corporate, social, whatever it may be, not just, and I don't want it to mean or disrespect, but not just open to public meetings. That's great. It's awesome. That's what it was built for. But it's not generating that cash to, on the other hand, show that, you know, we say 8 million now, the way we're looking at things, it could be 9 million, 10 million. So from my perspective, and from what I hear in the community over the years, get that plan that you know that you can sit down and say, we can generate that money. Getting back to the parking, we're in a quagmire of quicksand here over this. I absolutely see Amanda's point. I think without it, we're lost. I mean, the only real piece of land left that would hold that amount of cars would be Sundell's. And I think that is actually, I don't know exactly where that went in the past, that land behind the garage. So those are my points.
Tom, could I just speak to the parking for a minute?
Sure, Stephanie, and then Meredith raised her hand to speak next.
And I'd like to start by saying that I think, and I think everyone agrees with John and is spot on, that programming that brings money in so that the hall can be self-sustaining, or at least somewhat self-sustaining, is critical. And the type of events he's talking about. So Amanda, I don't think at this point, the parking lot is really resolving the town's parking in the downtown district. And in fact, the Nelson Nygaard parking, the downtown parking assessment determined that there's actually quite a bit of parking there. But it's when events occur, especially at the hall, that you get an overflow. And if you're going to attract the type of programming that's going to generate money, that parking is going to be used by those events. And in order to attract those events, there needs to be sufficient parking at the hall.
Meredith, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to address the parking as well. You might all remember Copeland Funeral Home, which is 38 Center Street. When I go to events in town, I often park on Center Street. And the town had an opportunity to buy that. There's a large parking lot to the left of the building. And the new owners had to make an agreement with the town to eliminate parking spaces and create more green space. So now we're looking at building 50 spaces behind Oaks Ames Hall on a wooded lot, when there was the opportunity to take a parking lot, to buy that parcel, or to make a deal with the new owners to use parking spaces. This is in recent time.
So I'm sorry, the point of that would be that you are for trying to solve parking a different way, or that's why
I'm
you're
with Amanda
supporting
all
parking
day
in there?
long. I mean, when this was presented, it unbeknownst to those abutters, they were aghast. You can imagine what needs to be done under construction to build a parking lot where we know there's a massive amount of ledge, on hills, treed lots. It's just, I get it that the building is a difficult spot, but there were other opportunities for parking than to have to do this in the backyards of these folks' private residences.
So you're against the parking here?
I think that something else needs to be done.
Understood.
If I may, Tom? Just Meredith, to your
Greg,
point,
and
it's not
then
in their
Ed had
backyards.
raised his
It's
hand
on,
too,
it's
so
on
Greg,
town's
you
land.
first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, Ed had raised his hand as well,
Oh,
but
I'm sorry.
Greg, you first, and then Ed, that would be great. Go for it, Greg.
Oh, sorry, I have audio issues. You know, I don't need to reiterate the times I've talked about why I think this makes sense. This is for the campus to unify the library and the hall campus, and we don't, you know, it's the beauty of having a diverse group. We don't all have to agree. But I was involved in the old Copeland funeral home, or the funeral home. They lost parking because they had to put a new septic system in. We approved that. There was no agreement with our board to reduce parking. They came in and we approved whatever they proposed. And that's, you know, 6 or 7 spots that were eliminated a half mile up the street. It doesn't, you know, to Stephanie's point, there is ample parking downtown. The effectiveness of it, though, you can compare that restaurant downtown to, for example, to Corfino's. I would submit they're both on the same, you know, same quality of food, same aesthetic, same desirability. But boy, it's a lot easier to park at Washington Plaza than out in the town parking lot. And I think the same thing applies to here. And I said this before, so I won't beat a dead horse, but when we buy our property, when we buy our houses, assuming we all live in houses or maybe condos, it's our responsibility to know what abuts us, and, you know, what could happen. So, you know, I have across the street from me, I have 180 acres of open space, but it's privately owned, most of it. And there's a good chance houses will go up there someday. So as much as I love seeing the nature, I've prepared myself for the day when I'll be a NIMBY, like most of the people that come into planning board. And, you know, 4 or 5 years ago when we proposed this, it was probably my responsibility to made a mistake. We were doing an awful lot of zoning that year. We didn't reach out to the clients because we ran out of time. I'm sorry, to the abutters. We discussed pulling it. We said, no, you know, we haven't heard anything. Let's go. And, you know, and then the 4 or 5 abutters. But the parking lot will be substantially below their grade. There will be an absolute opportunity to create buffering, it being natural, being, you know, hardscape, however it works out. And it'll be a benefit to the town. And if I purchased a property that abutted vacant town land next to municipal buildings, you know, I would have to prepare myself that at some point, unless there's a pond in the middle of that maybe something could happen there. There are land rights in town, and you know, that building's been a white elephant for years. And when all is said and done, we'll be spending what, 10 or 12 million on it total. It would be nice for the residents of this town if we could get some of the income back.
Could I, Ed, I will pass it to you quickly, but just for my own edification, I know you all have probably discussed this much more than I have, certainly. But in terms of the parking, is the parking, I know that in looking at the assessor's maps, that there's an easement here in between these 2 homes, and that we essentially, as a town, own back into here and all the way up to the property line of Oaks. Would access be through the hall coming in from Barrow Street, or is it proposed that there would be Lincoln Street access that goes all the way and wraps around and in?
So, Mr. Chairman, may I respond to that? No, we were not assuming that. We were assuming the access would be from the hall's Barrow Street parking, Barrow Street driveway.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we understand the limitations there, and thank you for putting this shot on the screen.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, that just helps for me. Ed, I know you've been patiently waiting. I appreciate it.
Well, just I want to make sure that we haven't passed over Amanda's objection to using CPA funds to pay for a parking lot, and you know, that's significant. We kind of skated along with the parking issue at the library and went for it, but this is a perfect example of where the town should perhaps step up with other funds, capital funds, perhaps, rather than CPA funds. Amanda's raising her hand.
Raising my hand, Tom.
Thank you. Sorry, head down, taking notes. Amanda, go for
And
it.
The notion, I mean, I understand that a parking lot would be tremendously helpful to the hall, and I'm a supporter of the hall, but it is not our job, and it's not our mandate to make it economically viable. And the notion that they're going to be able to make enough money to support that very large, very expensive, very precious building through events seems unlikely to me. And with such tremendously expensive and disruptive parking to be, I can't see people being supportive of that.
Thanks, Amanda. I do want to, first of all, say thank you to Fred. Thank you for patiently and joining. I do want to let the rest of the committee have any final commentary. I do not believe, Jim, you've had, or Dennis, any words to share. And if you don't have any, that's fine. I just want to afford you the opportunity to engage if you do. And then I also want to just offer Fred some time to have some chance to communicate with us as well.
He has his hand up.
He does. I just wanted to offer to Dennis and to.
I'm good, Tom. Thank you.
You're good. Excellent. Jim, you're good?
I'm good.
Excellent. Fred, thank you so much. I appreciate you raising your hand, and thank you patiently while we kind of explored the issues a bit in our own, and would love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a very good discussion. The one, I really just want to make one point, and that has to do with getting town support. Right now, we're almost at the point of signing 2 contracts, rental agreements with 2 community theater groups, which will be using the hall for performances. We also are lining up for, and that will also include summer camps for theater lessons. We also have Jack Colombo, who is going to do a summer music camp there for children. And what this is leading to is that we have found that we want to do a focus on performance, on getting people into the building, doing things for children, as well as adults, adult community theater. I believe this is Easton Community Theater is starting up again as an adult community theater with act, and I think it was Mary Gray, who was very successful with the children's theater. And we have another person who's had 30 years, this is the other group, in the community theater. So this is something we're taking very seriously to identify a real need that the hall can satisfy, and that there's really none of that around here. And both theater groups are very eager for that very reason to use the hall. It's just sort of a vacuum. It doesn't exist. So, my concern is, okay, people go to the town meeting and, they're going to ask the question themselves, well, what does the hall do for me? What is there, and you can't make the argument just, oh, it's a nice looking building with space you can rent. I mean, that's a hard case to make. So what we are doing is focusing on getting it established as a performance center. The second floor room and stage, the room has perfect acoustics. You've seen it, it's a very pleasing proportioned room. It's a natural. And we're also the cultural district's performance and event center already. So we really want to expand on that. And that upstairs room is the biggest asset we've had, and we've really failed this time up to now to really exploit it to its full value. And so I just want to make sure you all realize that the association is working very hard to make the connection to add the value to the community. Who is going to commit a sizable amount of money? And we take that very seriously, and we want to make people feel that it is worth doing. So that we are very much focused on that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Appreciate it, Fred. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Is there any other discussion or debate that we'd like to have regarding this particular matter? I know the immediate matter is for $472,000 worth of planning. I will ask Lynn of the similar question. I thought this is where Amanda was going. In both cases, of the $472,000, how much of that is related to parking studies and estimates?
Okay. So when you have a chance to take a look at and digest the attachment here. So the fee related to the parking portion of it, and by the way, it was parking as well as the connection, that part of it of this budget is the parking lot as well as the walkways to the library campus and the restoration of the monumental staircase. So I can take that apart for you for the next time I speak with you. But at this
Might be
point-
helpful just in terms of stepping back and hearing the dialogue that the team has had.
Yes.
I think that's an issue that would warrant further discussion, and it might help for the understanding of the ask for the immediate 472,000. I think it appears, having listened to everybody, that there's relatively broad consensus on the structure itself and the importance of preserving it to the town. But there seems to be probably more dialogue to be had around the parking, and being able to bifurcate out those amounts might just be helpful if necessary.
And that's exactly what I plan to do with that detailed spreadsheet. So I will make sure that I'm very clear about that. I'll separate the parking from the monumental staircase as well as the walkways to the basement. So you can see clearly what our thinking is on that subject.
Great, thank you. And John?
Yeah, Tom, I have something I'm hoping either Wayne or Stephanie can help me with. Getting back on the parking issue and on something I had mentioned, that land behind Sundell's. I know that was up for sale and there was a little bit of negotiation a few years ago and it got dropped. It's a large parcel and it's just sitting there collecting dust. What's going on with that? It would be such a perfect spot for it.
John, I'd had some conversations with Bobby Sundell about that. After the reference you're making, there was some discussion and then it was dropped, and we tried to pursue it again. I think the last time I talked with Bobby was probably 4 years ago. And he's the son of
Dot.
His parent, Dottie, and his father. His father lives in Florida, and his father doesn't want to sell it, doesn't want to do anything. So he doesn't have control over it. And I haven't had any conversations recently. I certainly can reach back out to him, but
I mean, it might be worth, sometimes it's just the right time, right place. I
oh
mean,
yeah.
You never know if it's been 3 or 4 years. Again, I don't know if I'm sure everybody in town is familiar with it. Again, it's a large piece of land just sitting there. I had heard back then a certain number, which I don't think it's fair to bring up now, but it's something to look, I think it should be addressed, looked into.
Yeah, I can check in with him. I mean, I think he knows, and if there'd been some movement, but he's not necessarily asking his father either, I would guess at this time,
Okay, Brad, oh, sorry, Lynn, did you want to make a final comment before we move on and get to other
I
business?
do. I do also want to respond to the point that was raised about, put some other money into this story. So one of the things that there's the association with their fundraising team have talked about several different grant possibilities. I mean, as a national landmark, this building is eligible for the Save America's Treasures program, and that program has been reactivated. I've got a project on it right now, which has a $500,000 grant. And so that's one thing I want to put forward. The Mass Cultural Facilities Fund, which funded that business plan, which, by the way, we would be happy to make available to this group because it actually does demonstrate how sustainability is possible with some support from grants and other sources. But they have capital projects. So, when this project is ready, the association, I'm sure, is going to want to apply to them. It's not huge money, but it could be $200,000 to $300,000, maybe $400,000. So we are trying to queue up the kinds of grants and support that would help incentivize the Town of Easton and the Community Preservation Committee to support the capital work here.
Tom, if I could ask Lynn a question.
Please.
The Mass Cultural Facilities Grant, is that active right now?
Yep. Actually, the
Mhm.
deadline for this coming cycle is tomorrow.
Okay, and has the hall submitted an application?
No, I think that the thinking had been in our discussions that we would actually be in a good position to apply for it next cycle. So
Okay.
get this planning work done, and I shouldn't say planning, get the plans and specs prepared and get the cost estimates to really as high a level as possible, as detailed a level as possible, and then move forward with these grant applications. So for instance, the Save America's Treasure would be coming up in the autumn of 2022. Mass Cultural Facilities would be due in January of 2023. So I think it might be helpful for the committee if we put together, if you will, a timeline. So you can see how these other sort of funding sources might be part of the story.
That would be helpful. And I was going to ask, and you cut me off at the pass.
Oops, sorry.
No, that's a good one. It's appreciated.
Okay.
Okay, unless there are other comments, I guess what I would probably just recommend is for us to consider the different nuances of the
Meredith has
conversation.
her hand up.
What was that, Ed?
Meredith has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Meredith. Go for it.
I just wanted to offer something anecdotal. Number one, I want to thank Fred for your tireless work on this, our most iconic building in Easton. It's hard for me to hear some of the costs that are needed, but I get it. I understand it. It's just very hard to get my arms around. But I recently went to the Orpheum Theater in Foxborough, and it was a truly delightful experience. And to be able to have something of that nature and have the hall be usable again in that type of capacity would be wonderful. And I just want to say that my resistance to a parking lot behind is not a reflection on the work that's needed to be done in the hall. It's just that I would like us to try to be a little more creative, perhaps in figuring that piece out. But Lynn, equally, I thank you for your work so far on this, your knowledge, your experience. It's well valued, and I certainly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Meredith. So I guess you hit the nail on the head. I think parking seems to be one of the issues that we would invest some time on. There seem to have been a couple other, in summation, aspects to it. One is the impact on neighbors. I think we all remember the town meeting and that there was a response to that. And so being thoughtful and considerate of that, I think, is appropriate. Two seem to have been the fundamental essence as to whether or not funds should be used for parking. And I think if we keep that in mind as well as we all prepare ourselves for the next time we get together, where I think we will be able to have a more meaningful discussion around those items. And it sounds like, just in summation again, that we are all for preserving this historic monument and trying to take the efforts to preserve it as the gem of the town, as Meredith described. So appreciate that. And I echo Meredith's sentiments. Fred, thank you so much for your efforts from behalf of the town and certainly on behalf of this building. And Lynn, thank you so much for so eloquently helping keep us informed about the aspects that we should consider, and your offer to help us understand the timeline for other funding efforts and breaking out the costs of the $472,000 initial ask along the lines so that we can have a meaningful discussion. And as we make decisions, we can quickly continue to move on and not have to wait for that additional information to circle back. And hopefully we can get to a final phase of a recommendation timely and be prepared for our recommendation for the annual town meeting. So with that, I think next up we have 555 Foundry Street. As Mr. Hands pointed out, we do have another iron fence preservation. Mr. Strange is up for an update for this.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
It's been a long night. I'll be succinct on this. So I'm going to share my screen quickly. I thank you for slipping this in. In the past year, we have rezoned the Furnace Village District. Bear with me for a second. Come on. There we go. I take it you all can see my screen. So on the left are a couple of photos from 100, 150 years ago of 555 Depot Street. Also on the corner of Quantico Depot. To the right are current day photos. And part of this rezoning, there's 4 districts we created. In the middle, we called it the Furnace Village Residential District. And there's maybe a dozen properties. And part of it, in trying to revitalize this area, we created a density bonus, we being the planning board, and the town voted at town meeting unanimously to approve. A density bonus if one were to enhance or further save, restore historic properties. This is, think of the Belcher Foundry, which is right across the street from this. This is one of 2 Belcher estates, one Belcher brother. And if I butcher this, Ed, feel free to chime in, but one of the Belcher families lived here, and then over on South Street, where a flexible development is being proposed, a second Belcher estate exists. And part of that flexible development is the developer, Bill Humphreys, has agreed to preserve and restore the existing dwelling. So we're always talking about our 3 neighborhoods in town, the Village, the Queesa Commercial District, basically 138, and then 5 Corners, or Furnace Village. And within the next 10 years, we will see a redesign and hopefully a reconstruction of this portion of 106 and 123 to include such things as sidewalks, landscaping, maybe some benches. Across the street, when Mr. Rick Lincoln, who also purchased this property, he has been preliminary approved by planning board, and we're just waiting to get through conservation for a 46 lot compact neighborhood, Easton's first compact neighborhood to go in. And part of that mitigation is monies to go towards redesigning of the street and widening of the road and installation of traffic lights with passing lanes here, turning lanes, I should say, here at Quantico. So with all that coming up, and then there's been a group, I believe, about to be formed to maybe restore or create Swift's Park over here. So if you can see my mouse, this sort of triangle is actually a town park called Swift's Park. So being a planner, thinking in the future, seeing how this area is going to improve, we have a number of proposals coming up from homeowners and property owners on their historic properties. Mr. Lincoln has proposed turning this house into a 2-family, into a duplex. He's going to strip off this non-original, non-historical portico. He's going to go back to simulated divided light windows. There's like 2.5-inch colonial 1950s casing. He's going back to appropriate casing. He's creating granite stairs. And he's going to be building a new garage, which will have the same federal style. Then there's 2 lots that were created next door, which part of site plan, and he's agreed to give the planning board architectural approval on those on the exterior, and he's going to be going with a nice federal style to kind of further enhance the history. So with all this, when Rick first contacted us a few months ago that he was buying this, and he talked about the fence, and maybe I'll just take the fence down. And I'm like, oh, no, you can't. That's an icon for that neighborhood. That fence needs to stay. And this fence was actually created at the Foundry right across the street. And it's a very unique fence, very thick. And this gate right here, it's actually it's a pivot gate. It pivots in the middle. And there's one of 3 on this property. And DeAngelis Irons Works, one of the top fence restorers in the country, who we're lucky enough to have in our town. They've been out and they've never seen gates like this. So I told Rick, no, you have to keep that fence. And he goes, oh, I don't know if I can restore it. It's going to cost a lot of money. And I said, well, And so long story short, Rick's the problem, there is a design flaw in this fence that the bottom rail was kind of designed abutting the ground, and that has rotted out. Fence is in decent shape. It could stay. It looks good enough the way it is. But knowing that we want to create these neighborhoods, and knowing that CPA kind of especially when we get that match, you know, it allows us to be indulgent as a town, doesn't it? Right? Projects that we could never do, whether it's, you know, some open space acquisition or the Wheaton Farm barn or, you know, the gardens at the Queesit. And knowing that this section of town really hasn't received much, if any, CPA money, you know, Rick was going to go in, spend, you know, 10, 15 grand to just kind of shore this thing up. He agreed to keep it. And we were out on site. We had a joint site meeting with historical and planning board. And, you know, so a few of us got thinking, and it's like, you know what, maybe this is, you know, and the cost to restore this fence right now is $273,000, which you go, oh boy, that's a big number. And I'll talk about that quickly in a second. And I'm not looking to deliberate this tonight. I just wanted to throw it out there and see if we would accept an application. I know this is, you know, this just came up, but what's happening, this is probably going to be approved as a condo project within the next, or as a duplex, I should say, but there'll be condo in the next month or two. And Rick has agreed if we've got CPA funding that he would go, he'd have it done ahead of time so the town wouldn't have to do it. We wouldn't have to worry about overages and all the other things we hear. And he could be paid at the end, sort of the way we used to do it. That's old school CPA. Remember, we used to do that like Ed in the old days like that. DeAngelis would come out, they would remove the entire fence, take it back to their shop, they would sandblast it, they would create a new bottom rail. And then you can, on all these posts in the middle, there's an amount of detail, almost fleur-de-lis that are long since gone. They're going to recast it. This fence will be brought back to its original form. It would receive you know, it'd be sandblasted, it'd be primed, it would receive an epoxy paint coat and then back and reinstalled. Similar to projects that they've done at Harvard, similar to a project they did at, you know, the Copley Square T station. And the thought is, you know what, if they have the vision, you think, wow, this fence, because I think it really should stay. It's so unique. It's great, ties a great story into this neighborhood. Ed, you can expand your local tours. You can come up here someday when we have site walks. And when
Sidewalks, I can do that. That'd be
when
good.
this exactly, they'll be there. They're coming. You know, when this park's done, this could really be, you know, not you know, it's amazing. The more you dig into it, not only Northeastern has the history in this town, it's all over. So I thought I wanted to bring this up, you know, and you know, someone said, well, we always talk about putting in, you know, what about other people's money? Again, for what Rick paid for this house, I understand it's not going to work. You know, it's not going to work out for him to spend $273,000 to restore it. He did agree that the 15 grand he budgeted, he would put into it. He agreed to include in condo documents a requirement, you know, in the historical preservation agreement that the owners, you know, can't paint it, they can't move it. If it's damaged within the car accident, you know, similar to the Lincoln Street School, the insurance policy would be written to cover it. So it's the time to do it would be now. So I'm trying to slip it into this funding cycle. And frankly, when I first started, I said, oh, that's just, yeah, it's just too much money. You know, when you think about that for a fence. But boy, when you think of what this could do for the area and the fact that it really is historical, and I know maybe I'm a member of the Historical Society, I'm a commission. Not everybody's going to have the historical bone, but I think it's a project worth considering. So I'll be quiet now. And I thank you for your time.
Can I ask, can we move it?
Well, where would you move it to?
Swift Park.
Yeah, so the problem with that is, first, if you move it, you'd have to you know, you'd have to come up with some design for this is set in granite right now in pieces. Some of them are actually tied into ledge on the site, so you'd have to come up with that. And in a public park, these gates are not going to be, I assume, are not going to be ADA compliant, so it may be an issue that way. And I would say part of the charm of this is it's in the you know, it's in its original setting. You know, it would, if we want to put a wrought iron fence around the park, maybe we just put in $20,000 or $30,000.
Well, I mean, in truth, I mean, I've had my kids at Swift Park. It's an island between roads. It's pretty much if you're going to have children there, you've got to fence it. And I get the resistance to move it, but I'm concerned about doing that type of a renovation on private property, very similar to the conversation that we had about Smith Farm on state property. And over time, things change. And if we could preserve it and move it even to another location, I'd be more inclined to be excited about spending a couple $100,000 to save it.
Haven't we done a number of these projects on private property? You know, Spring Hill.
We have.
In theory, Oaks Ames, right? It's private property. You want to be. Oh, Ed, go ahead, son.
Yeah, I want to congratulate you on being succinct, or at least trying. And
Chock full of info, Ed.
I want to point out just a couple of things. The house itself is very significant. It was built about 1810, and it was a counter to the house at Wheaton Farm. And it was built on the same plan, except that it's 4 feet bigger on each side. And if you take a look at the picture on the upper left-hand side, that piece in the back is where the Belchers housed their workers, or some of their workers. So restoring it to a duplex is almost restoring it to the way that the building was.
That whole section right there, Ed?
Yeah, this whole back section was added on. The front section, the federal section, was built by Shepard Leach, who was our first millionaire before Oliver Ames made all his money. And it's in itself, it's incredibly historic. It was taken over by Lincoln Drake, who ran the foundry in front of Old Pond, and then it was taken over by the Belchers. The last Belcher that lived in here was Caroline Belcher Bullfinch, who was one of the founding members of the Historical Commission. So it has a long historical association. I think the fence in any other place would lose all its meaning. And to restore this, it could be a keystone to this new historic neighborhood that we're talking about. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Swift's Park in a minute. And I agree with Meredith that it's not safe for kids unless you're the type of parents that tell your kids go play in the traffic. I've
done that.
Yeah, but we have ideas and plans. John is full of ideas about this park, and I think that will be taken care of. We also need to know that there's going to be a stoplight here and sidewalks, so it's going to become somewhat safer. And the idea of putting a fence around it's not a bad one, Meredith, but not that fence. This is probably the second historic neighborhood besides Northeastern that still has a shot of showing off its history. The building in back of Swift's Park, as you know, Meredith, was also associated with the foundry, and so you have two beautiful pieces there. Hopefully, the development across the street looks like it has potential to be a really interesting and positive experiment. So let's not destroy what little history there is left in the town. I'd be in favor of this. Obviously, you'd expect me to be, but no surprise. But we spent so much money in Northeastern. Let's spend some money someplace else.
So Ed, I assume you'd therefore be in favor of accepting an application. Greg, you're in favor. Just a sentiment, if I could go around. Jim, would you be in favor of accepting an application? I'm sure there'd be continued discussion, dialogue, and debate.
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Meredith?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
And I will as well, Broussard. So Greg, I appreciate you for surfacing this. If you could help coordinate an expedited application. I'm assuming, just want to ask that there is no violation of any rules or policies for accepting an application this late. And Stephanie, do you want to?
I am going to speak to that because we also were just approached by Bill Matthews at the high school, as well as David Twombly from the school district. They each have projects that they would like to submit. They're much larger projects. One is for rehabilitation or reconstruction of the tennis courts at the high school. And the other is for a new play area for the Richardson Olmsted. Am I right, Meredith? It's the Richardson Olmsted School.
Yeah, their playground.
Yeah, for the kids. And we indicated, and again, I think the board can discuss this, but we told them that the application period for the 2022 applications for consideration at town meeting was closed. So
Could we suggest that the school committee has funds of its own?
I think it would be only fair, I think it appropriate if in this particular situation, if we are going to, I do not see where our policy states that we only accept applications through May. I see in the application timeline that we invite preliminary CPA applications in May. So I'm not sure if there are additional policies and guidelines, and I'll explore that afterwards. But if the committee would so permit me, I would prefer to be fair. And if there are known applications that we've been approached with, I think it would be appropriate if we are going to reopen it for this particular one, to at least have dialogue around the others. And in that way, create an open forum. I don't think it would be fair if Stephanie, under the auspices of trying to follow the rules and guidelines that have been set forth, said no to others, and we just brought this one forth. So if that's okay, Stephanie.
And my
do you wanna take
question
it?
would be, is there a reason, Greg, that this couldn't be considered for the 2023? I mean, is
Well, I think
it,
this is, well, first of all, I just want to speak to, if I'm not mistaken, we've changed our policies every year, but if I'm not mistaken, in the last couple of years, we accepted applications after our supposed deadlines. And the reason to move on this one quickly is it's not going to take a lot of construction for this to be converted to a duplex. And this would be sold off to two homeowners with with a condo association, and Mr. Lincoln would be removed from it. So I don't see a successful path dealing with two homeowners, and I certainly don't see a successful path with two homeowners funding the construction, the waiting to be reimbursed at the end. And I didn't think this was that big of an ask, fiscally, given the numbers we look at. So I thought it would be an easy, I'm not saying people will vote for it, but I thought it was something that we could look at. It should be a simple application. And I thought time was of the essence for the reasons I've stated.
So I did go back to the schools and told them, and based on a conversation that Stephanie and I had, that the application process begins in August. So I think it's really important that we get this hammered out, because I'll need to go back to the schools and tell them that they can submit. I think that it would be unjust for us to consider one, and having told them when they were ready to queue up and submit, unaware of the timeline that we have. So
I just want to say, I'm not looking to cause any trouble. So you know what, I can just pull this. If this is going to be that big of a deal, then, I would hate to see
Actually, if it's okay, wait,
substantial.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna step in, pause, I'm gonna step in. It's already been agreed that we'll accept the application, Greg.
Okay.
So, however, I think it's fair we look at the other applications as well to assess whether or not there might be a critical need there too. Then going forward at one of our future meetings, we'll come up with a very clear policy. And the fact that it might have changed previously doesn't impact me, and the fact that what's published now is what people went by. And that's probably what Meredith and Stephanie were reacting to. And that's okay too. Opportunities present themselves, and for us to be flexible, I think is fair, as long as we're not breaking any written policies and guidelines and I can't find them. But I do want to reserve the right to connect with Stephanie afterwards to make sure there aren't additional materials that we should be considering. Ed, I think you had your hand up that you want
just very quickly. We've already heard tonight from Greg Swan that he's suggesting that our application process puts a lot of pressure on town projects coming in, and that they would fit in a timeline very similar to what we're talking about now. So I think As Greg has pointed out, we've always made exceptions when good projects have come along. So why don't we just allow all three to come in?
And so I'd just like to understand the other two first before we entertain adding that as an agenda item, just so I can ask the questions I think that Stephanie raised, which is explain the need for now. I appreciate cost escalation could be a factor in all the discussions, but I just would like to understand that. And I appreciate Greg answering Stephanie's question on that because it seems to be a unique opportunity. And I think you're right, Ed, we probably should review our timelines, rules, and policies so that we can be very clear and transparent to the public and even amongst ourselves so that we can inadvertently say no when we could say yes or vice versa.
Just a word on the Richardson Olmsted Playground. That was one of the very first CPA funded projects way back in the early days of CPA. So those pieces of playground equipment have been around for quite a while. So I can understand why they may be coming towards us for more.
Meredith, is it okay if I just connect with you at some point after the call and Stephanie to just talk about those school-related items?
Sure.
Yep.
Awesome.
Can I just get permission? Can I go back to, I mean, I just kind of sealed their fate on the funding for the year. So I just want to get board approval. Can I send an email out tomorrow morning that says there was a change of heart and you can submit, even though I told you you couldn't, that you can submit an application. Doesn't mean it's going to be approved this year, but you can certainly submit. We don't want to close the door on you at this point.
I would just caveat it with pending a review for us if the board wants to vote, but I'd like to have that in the future as an agenda item, not brought up impromptu, so that we can make sure people have time to prepare for them. But if the board wants to provide the latitude for Meredith, myself, and Stephanie to have a discussion after this meeting, assess the topics, again, I'm not even sure what we're talking about. So I'd like to be a little bit more informed before I could authorize that. Others might be more informed. And if they so want to empower us to do that, then we could do that and then bring the applications before everybody and put it on agenda so that they could engage in the discussion.
My understanding that these are just preliminary, particularly the Richardson Olmsted Playground. They're just beginning the process. The tennis courts were a little more pressing and Bill Matthews can move pretty quickly. But the Olmsted School is just in its playground as its beginning stages. So it wouldn't be a full application as far as I would imagine. It's just the beginning stages.
Sure. So if the committee wants to empower the three of us to separately have a discussion and then go back to the schools as we see fit to have them pursue reapplying now that the gate might be open, we could do that and then bring it back before the committee in full.
Do you want to make that a motion?
We could.
So I move that we appoint a subcommittee of Meredith, Stephanie, and Tom to meet together to examine the application process for the two proposed school projects.
Sounds like an old pro, Mr. Hands. Second by
Lee.
Lee. Go around the table. I believe I have my list. Jim?
Jim, I.
Greg?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
John?
John, aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
And Broussard, aye. All right, thanks, everybody. Ed, thank you for the recommendation and so eloquently putting it together for us. And Greg, again, thank you for raising the opportunity for us.
Thank you.
Next up, speaking of the devil, if you want to leave your screen up, you can. It is the Swifts Park Committee, or we might have some slides from other folks, but I hope everybody had the opportunity to review the presentation that was shared and sent around. Stephanie, do you just want to walk us through what we're trying to accomplish today?
Yes, and I don't think did we send it to the rest of the members? I think I just sent it to the chairs of the boards. So as Greg mentioned, and I believe we've talked about this at the CPC in the past. There was a suggestion that the Swifts Park actually be rehabilitated or redeveloped to be a memorial park commemorating the victims and first responders of both the pandemic of 1918 and the pandemic of 2019 to 20.
To present.
In the present, yes, yes. This too will pass. And a presentation was made to the select board, making a recommendation to appoint a steering committee whose responsibility, their mission would be seeking input from the community. Thank you. Is that Ed or?
It's not me.
That was me. You're
Hey,
welcome.
Tom. All right.
Tom.
This is the presentation that we did for the select board. So essentially, so Tom, thank you. I probably should have had this up. If you could go to the first page. And Ed was going to chime in here at some point.
Yeah, Swiss Park probably, let me say that I was the person that came up with this idea. And the reason is that when I first started on the Historical Commission a million years ago, we were trying to get a National Register district in Furnace Village. Another reason to preserve that fence was it is finally, after a decade of work, a National Historic Register district. And in the course of that, we came across the fact that Lawrence Swift, who was the son of the owner of Swift Store, or the building in back of the park, died as a hospital orderly, helping people that were fighting the flu epidemic. And so it was the Lawrence Swift Park, we think. It's hard to find the stuff, and it's so long ago that even I forgot whether we officially made it that way, but it seems that we did. Knowing that there were other projects that were going to spiff up this area, I thought it would be really good to memorialize something that's been important in our lifetime, and also have an opportunity to improve the park. And John Ventresco took a look at the park, and basically there's going to be fireworks and water fountains, and also he's got a million ideas on what to do with this third of an acre to turn it into a place that folks that are walking from the Avalon area to the Five Corners area can stop and rest. People can play there. It was originally Furnace Village Green and had a bandstand there, so it's pretty much served as a park for a long time. But this is an opportunity to memorialize something significant and also spiff up the neighborhood. And before we start talking about money, the very first thing that I want to do, if I get on the committee, would be to seek as much private funding for this as possible. I think it's, Meredith has proven with Alley's Park that, and also Keach Park, that public-private mixes can really make these little parks very successful.
And
So Wyatt Park, it was originally the green. Look at that. I remembered that. Open Space Recreation Plan recommends mini parks in neighborhoods. There's one in back of the Northeastern Grammar School, for example. There's Povos Park, which we spend money on Center Street, which it sort of serves the same use as Swift's Park would as a resting place on Center Street. New zoning, promoting neighborhood development and long-range plans to construct sidewalks, so this won't be an isolated island anymore. And the heroes and the lost of 1918 and 2020 deserve recognition. So that's my idea.
So the select board did vote to support the project and to appoint a steering committee to move this forward. The mission of the committee is to seek input from the community and to direct the process for building support for designing, advancing, and monitoring development of the park into a remote, wearing a mask too often, memorial park honoring the first responders and victims of the two pandemics. The board, the steering committee will be comprised of up to 11 people appointed by the select board, with representation from the select board, the rec commission, historical commission, the CPC, Board of Health, Commission on Disabilities, a representative from the fire department and the police department as first responders. And then there are 3 at-large positions. So tonight we're asking for the CPC to vote for their representative on the steering committee. And the appointment is going to be for a period of 3 years, effective from the date of appointment. However, that again, that may be extended as needed for a specific period of time beyond that.
Thanks, Stephanie. Ed, I think you've thrown your hat in the ring by expressing your interest. Are there others on the committee that also have interest?
I do.
John?
I'm
Anybody?
on as the recreation representative.
Excellent, Meredith, thank you for that. So besides John and Ed, are there others in the committee that have a material interest in representing us for the park? Okay, hearing that, knowing the 2 players that are left, John and Ed, does anybody want to self-select either the other or one another?
Well, John could be the historical commission representative too, so. And I can always try for an at-large, although we've been very lucky to have a number of people from the neighborhood interested in participating in this, so.
Stephanie,
If I could just speak up, I think it's important because again, this was Ed's idea. And when he first talked to me about it, you know, I brought it to the town administrator, who was very supportive. And then we started to talk with John, and John's been very interested, and you know, we've had some preliminary conversations. So I think having, and not that this board can appoint 2 members, but I do think it's important. And I think that one or the other, that if they're not selected by the board, that they will, you know, we will see that they get appointed by the select board as best we can.
Stephanie,
Go ahead, John.
I'm sorry, Tom. So Stephanie, do we have a preliminary list of?
I don't have that handy.
John, you've maintained an email list throughout this of people that express interest early on, and we need to tell them it's time to apply.
And people have, I'm quite certain that Arlene Keach has applied, and I believe Dale Carrister has applied at this point in time.
All three have. I did send out an email about a week ago.
Excellent.
You should have been CC'd on that, Ed, correct?
Your email, I didn't see that one, John.
And I think, Ed, have you submitted or?
No, I was waiting for this, and then I will submit if I don't win this election.
So we can only appoint 1, right? So there's no latitude there. So if we focus on the business at hand, I do want to offer John and Ed a moment to see if they want to noodle which of the 2 of them might be best fit. Other than that, we'll do the normal democratic process.
Well, I would concur that Ed is the resident historian and knows the most about this park. So if I would leave it to Ed without a doubt.
And I will go to the Historical Commission and ask for John's appointment as their representative, because he's been around longer than almost anybody on, in fact, longer than anybody on that commission, and has been involved in other projects in the Furnace Village area.
So I think we have a path out of this then. So John, if I could give you the honors, I think you could make the motion for Ed to be appointed as the committee representation for the Swift Park Steering Committee.
Okay, so you want me to, I'm sorry, so you want,
Would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion as stated by Tom, where I would be representing the Historical Commission and Ed would be representing our illustrious committee, the CPA.
Sorry, so you're going to make a motion on behalf of our committee, just to nominate Ed as representative for ours. And then, so that's just kind of a good move. And I would recommend when the right time comes that Ed goes and helps that committee make their recommendation. So John has made a motion. Does anybody want to second that?
Second, Varela.
Varela has seconded. Roll call will be Jim,
Aye.
Greg,
Range aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Amanda,
Aye.
Meredith,
Aye.
and Broussard, aye, and Mr. Ventresco, I applaud you for the diplomacy.
Yeah,
Mr.
and
Hand?
I would just like to add that to Ed's point about raising money and soliciting volunteers and other interested persons, while someone may not be appointed to the steering committee, anyone who's still interested, I would encourage to participate in meetings and in the providing input as the process proceeds.
Well said,
Can I ask a
Stephanie.
quick
Meredith?
question that Greg or Stephanie may know? I can't remember if I asked you this, Stephanie, but is there a play structure of any capacity planned for the development across the street?
And I believe there is not.
No, there's
And-
not. There's
Yeah.
parking for access to the paths out there, but there's no play structure. They don't want kids in there. No, just kidding.
Well, it's not age restricted, right?
No, there is a community center or, whatever. I don't know, it's been so long since I've looked at that plan. Which originally there was a pool and then they got rid of the pool and they're going to put a tennis court there. But there was no play structure because each yard there is a house. I mean, each house has a yard.
But they're what, like 10,000 square foot lots?
Yep.
5 to 10, but there's a sizable, if someone wants a play structure in their yard, they will be able to do that.
Thanks, Greg. So I think that was the last item officially on our business list of business for tonight. I do want to take a few moments. I know we've had a long session, but I think if we can enter executive session for a few moments to get an update on the items that we have been discussing to try to bring those further along. So with that, I would take a motion to conclude our regular session and to enter into executive session under purposes 6 of Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, as I am declaring that an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the negotiating position of our body, not to reconvene to open session.
Including Stephanie and Wayne and
That right there is great leadership, spoken well from probably saying it many times in the past. Yes, sir. Well said, Jim.
being corrected myself many times.
Well
We'll
said.
second the motion.
Excellent. So that was, I think, Lee and Hans. Jim,
Aye.
Greg,
Range aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Amanda,
Aye.
Meredith,
Aye.
and Broussard, aye.